On Larry King Now, after a tumultuous 2016, we're discussing finding happiness in 2017. What is your definition of happiness?
It is a state of contentment and acceptance.
Even if you're a Hillary supporter, you assume, well, she's lost this time, but ultimately this will be for the good. There are opportunities here that I hadn't seen before.
What about the disconnect in America today? When we see it all around us, and then we have the media to explore it, how do you deal with that?
You have to partially disengage and make that decision to disengage. And that's a choice, that we can put the cell phones down for a few minutes every day.
What we're noticing is there more and more knowledge in the world and less wisdom.
Yes.
I mean, everybody watching this program is going to take in more data today than Shakespeare did in his entire lifetime.
Plus, multiple studies have shown that meditation is linked to decreased anxiety and increased compassion. Why doesn't everybody do it?
I often think we have this double standard. It's so short-sighted because it's that inner exercise that is much more essential to my well-being than just my physical health. But I think we grasp at what we can see and we forget the important stuff is what we can't see.
It's all next on Larry King Now. Welcome to this special edition of Larry King Now. After a year marked by an acrimonious political season, terrorist attacks, refugee crises, and police shootings, many people closed 2016 feeling dismayed, even fearful. According to Pew Research, 41% of voters said Donald Trump's election made them feel sad or scared. And a November Gallup poll found Election Day and the day following to be two of the most stressful days on record since it started tracking Americans' mood in 2008. So today we're devoting our episode to happiness. What is it? Why is it so easily eluding? And how to find a sense of it at a time when divisiveness and distress are at a high. Joining me to discuss the subject, Mitra Rabar is a spiritual teacher, healer, and singer. Her book is Miraculous Silence, A Journey of Illumination and Healing Through Prayer. And Pico Iyer is an essayist who has studied movement and stillness for more than 30 years. He's the author of several books and a frequent contributor to the New York Times and Time magazine. And Pico has given 3 TED Talks. Your definition of happiness. Mine would be the absence of unhappiness. Or else you'd walk around deliriously happy all the time. What is your definition of happiness?
Happiness is such a broad term, and it's so fleeting, it's fleeting. But I think it is a state of contentment and acceptance. That's what I think it comes down to, acceptance and being content with what you accept.
Pico?
I'd say it's absorption. When I'm completely lost in what I'm watching or somebody I'm talking to and I forget the time, I forget myself. That, I think, is happiness.
Well, let's give an example of happiness, unhappiness the same day. If you're a Trump voter, you're happy. If you're a Hillary voter, you're unhappy. According to your theory, a Hillary voter should be content, accept change, right?
Well, happiness is a journey we take. So, for example, if you're a Hillary voter and you're very upset because of what happened, you're devastated, I think you almost go through a grieving process, the stages of grief. You get angry, you go into denial, you try to bargain it, like, how can I change this? And then you get into an acceptance. But when you get into an acceptance, does not mean that you just accept everything. No, it means you rebuild.
But if you're a Trump voter, you're happy.
Well, there's a difference between joy and happiness. So happiness, as you say, changes every minute. I'm happy talking to you, and then I leave this room and I'm unhappy. But joy is a much more spacious perspective. And I spend a lot of time with monks or people of faith, or just if you believe there's logic in the universe, then even if you're a Hillary supporter, you assume, well, she's lost this time, but ultimately this will be for the good. There are opportunities here that I hadn't seen before. I shouldn't fight against circumstance. I should work with it. It's my friend. And I think joyful people have that.
Exactly.
How about fear? For example, we see a shooting every day and terrorism. How about living with fear of someone coming to harm us? Isn't fear unhappiness? How do I overcome fear?
Yeah, I mean, fear definitely feeds unhappiness. And fear is where there is the absence of love and security and peace. And how do we overcome this is the big question. Now, first I want to say, Larry, that the world is not new to the acts of violence. It's just that we are more now aware of it because of the computer age. There has always been violence. There have always been acts of terror against people. But how do we overcome it, and how we do not let our fear define us is the key. And that's where we have to go into what I believe the positiveness of any circumstance, and see through that how we can channel a good energy, a good light.
What part, Pico, does the media play in this?
Well, as I was listening to Mitra, I was thinking, like you, I've been in this job a long time. And so tomorrow, for example, 6.5 billion people will probably be really kind to their neighbors, and 3 won't. And you and I know in the news business, we'll focus on that 3.
Right.
So I think anybody who's fearful is paying too much attention to the news and forgetting that the news is about exceptional things. And the regular things of people being kind to one another never feature in the news. And the fact that they don't feature...
All news
is
is generally bad.
Yeah,
except
exactly.
Cancer is cured.
If it bleeds, it leads. Precisely, yes. And I think one of the things with fear is it's based on the unknown, what we think is going to happen an hour from now. We don't know what's going to happen. I could be fearful of somebody hitting me when I leave this room. Somebody probably is going to be very kind to me when I leave this room. So why don't I concentrate on what's happening right here, which isn't fearful. I'm talking to 2 friends and I'm having a good time.
What about the disconnect in America today? Congress, the Republicans hate the Democrats hate the Republicans, the president-elect hates the current president. When we see it all around us, and then we have the media to explore it, how do you deal with that?
You have to partially disengage and make that decision to disengage. And also, I think it's like we have really compartmentalized so much. We say, oh, this is a Republican, so it means this and this and this. This is a Democrat, it means this and this and this. And I think that's what's gotten us into a lot of hot water. We have to see a person by the merit of which they stand, not by the label that media or other people give to them. Because we have phenomenal people who are Republicans and phenomenal people who are Democrats. So I think it's also for us to not, like, Pico says, we have to choose not to engage into all this negative press. And that's a choice, that we can put the cell phones down for a few minutes every day.
And people...
Who does that?
People are much subtler than their labels. We all know that we don't want to be pushed in categories, so it's silly for us to push other people into categories. So
You get desensitized to this? In other words, another shooting today, another shooting, this guy shot up an airport, this guy shot up a hospital, the airports are closed, there's a bomb threat. Oh, it's another day in America.
We do. And although I'm a practicing journalist, many years ago I moved from New York to rural Japan. I don't watch TV there, I don't have any media, and I still have to be responsible for the news, but I don't want to follow the breaking news which contradicts itself every 2 minutes. And exactly, I don't want to be desensitized to what's happening, so I'll check in with the news every week rather than every minute.
Personal unhappiness is very different, is it not? The loss of someone, divorce, child on drugs, right? That's much harder to deal with than governmental things.
Yes and no, I think, because our government, our homeland, is in a way our security of mind. So when we feel insecure with a government, then it's going to feed every other aspect of our life. So, it's like we look at the president as, in a way, the parent figure, whether that's right or not, but we do. And so when we have a parent in power that we have a hard time liking or respecting, then it's like becomes then personal. How am I going to get through this myself?
We're discussing happiness in a time of upheaval. Up next, the importance of meditation and mindfulness on our sense of well-being. Stay with us. We're back with Mitra Rabar and Pico Iyer. Our subject is happiness. Even in times like this, would you make the argument that happiness comes from within?
100%. And as you were saying, personal unhappiness is really hard to deal with. But the beauty of it is that it's in our own power. I was just reading yesterday, if you lose somebody you care about, of course you feel grief and you should feel grief. But think about how you can do best justice to the person you've lost. And that person would probably want you to be moving forwards, to do what she had encouraged you to do, not to be grieving. And think about that person more than yourself, and already you're beginning to turn it around. You know, there's, as you know, Larry, there's this very interesting research been done on happiness where they found it isn't really a matter of your circumstances, that people who are suddenly rendered paraplegic are shocked and need maybe a year to adjust. But at the end of the year, when they're asked how happy they are, they're as happy as they were before the accident. And people who suddenly win the lottery tomorrow, after a year, they exult that day, and a year later, they're no happier than they were before. They're spending all their time with lawyers. They don't know whom to trust anymore. Their life is much more complicated. And so really, I think it's not to do with what's happening to us so much as you said, who we are and what resources we've built inside.
Multiple studies have shown that meditation is linked to decreased anxiety and increased compassion. Are you a big supporter of meditation?
I'm a huge supporter of meditation.
What does it do to think about nothing?
Well, you train your mind to think about nothing. And in that nothingness, something miraculous happens. You
Like?
connect to yourself. We have so much chatter, you know. We have so much noise inside of us, you know. And when we sit to meditate, which takes practice, we slowly unravel. And where we unravel, we'll see the pure us. And in that space, there is a peace, a clarity that we get. So whatever we put into meditation, we get it back so much in return.
We've heard all our lives that meditation's wonderful. Why doesn't everybody do it?
I know. It's like going to the health club or taking your medicine. And I often think we have this double standard. I remember my doctor said to me a few years ago, you're fine, but you're not getting any younger. You should exercise 30 minutes every day. And as soon as he said that, I signed up at the health club. I religiously exercise. But a little later, a friend of mine said, well, why don't you just sit quietly for 30 minutes every day? You're always rushing around and flying around. That would help you. And I said, no, I don't have time, especially now I'm going to the health club. And it's so short-sighted because it's that inner exercise that is much more essential to my well-being than just my physical health. Because if, you know, we all know if you're really buff and toned, but your mind is shaky, you're in big trouble. Yeah. Whereas if your mind is strong, even when your body is weak, you can get through. But I think we grasp at what we can see and we forget the important stuff is what we can't see.
And I think the key is also, Larry, that people get sometimes scared of meditation. And I always say walk into it gently.
Scared of what?
Well, sitting by themselves, like, how am I going to do this? It's going to make me anxious. People say, I'm getting anxious to think of meditate. And meditation comes in different forms. You know, the Native Americans did walking meditation, where they took a walk, and every step they took, they walked away from thinking. You know, a painter who paints every day, that's a form of meditation. So meditation is not in one form, but it is to lose ourselves to that noise and come into our own space.
What's the best tip you have for coping with disappointment, whether it's in a child or a country?
Step back and see the larger picture. If you focus on this one thing that's made you sad, you're only going to get sadder and sadder. But look at the good things that have happened, the positive developments in the world, and the fact that by tomorrow you're going to be caught up in some new drama and may well have forgotten about that. Things are never as big or momentous as they seem.
You recommend not trying to fight your anxiety.
Yes.
What do you recommend doing about anxiety?
I think anxiety, we are human beings, and I think always thinking that we have to constantly feel great and there's no anxiety and there's no other feelings we have is not natural. Anxiety is a part of life, and when we feel it, we have to just say, let it flow. It will flow through me, and I'm not going to give it power, and it'll flow out. You know, I mean, this is about mild anxiety. I'm not talking about someone who has extreme cases of anxiety, but when we're anxious, it's not always that we're fearful. Sometimes we're excited. Like, you know, I had a little butterfly in my stomach coming here, meeting you and meeting Pico. That's a good kind of anxiety. Oh. So, you know, it just depends how you define anxiety.
Does money make you happier? We're discussing the external factors that influence our happiness and what doesn't matter at all. That's next. We're back with our great panel with Mitra and Pico. Why do we equate happiness with making $1 million? Why does money make us happy? Because we can get things, right?
Which we'll lose. We're foolish to make that equation. And we're sitting in Los Angeles right now, and down the street, I would wager there are a lot of billionaires or millionaires who are on their 6th wedding, they're in therapy every week, and are probably hungry for what certain people in the streets of India or Haiti may have in terms of resilience and care and family values. So anyone who's attaching themselves to something that's going to go away is in trouble, I think.
So external things.
That's
don't
right.
we? How about all the research now on the menace of the iPhone? The bad things about people not talking to each other, engrossed in it, texting while driving. You ever see people when they can't find their cell phone? It's panic.
Yeah,
That's why I have a flip phone. I don't want that.
It's a kind of a new disease of our society to not want to engage with one another and instead want to kind of put this wall up. So there's always, you know, even people, young people tell me, we don't call, we only text. So that means implying that don't call. So I think I'm hoping, being optimistic, that this is a fad in our society. I'm hoping that as we come together more and with the governments of
But
the
how
world...
does that happen as more people get iPhones?
Each of us has a choice. So I'm a busy journalist. I've never used a cell phone in my life. And I think what we're noticing is more and more knowledge in the world and less wisdom.
Yes.
I mean, everybody watching this program is going to take in more data today than Shakespeare did in his entire lifetime. Does that mean we're wiser than Shakespeare or know more? I think it means we know less in many cases. With more and more data, less and less time to make sense of it.
A study at Kent State found that people who check their phone frequently tend to experience more distress during leisure time.
Yes.
Yeah, because they don't...
But everyone who has it checks it frequently, right?
So in places like China, they actually have internet rescue camps where they administer cold turkey to kids to get them off cell phones the way they would be off heroin. But I think the great thing about this is it's in our hands. Any one of us can choose, just take 3 hours away from your devices, or ideally 1 day. And I'm struck when I go to Silicon Valley, the people who make the technologies are the ones who are most wise about the limits for it. So there they often go totally offline for 48 hours.
What did 9/11 do to us?
woke us up. It woke us up. Very, very tragic day in history. Shook us, woke us up, traumatized us, and we are still grasping what has happened.
Is anger good?
Righteous indignation is good if we're angry about injustice or cruelty or whatever. But by and large, I make the least discerning choices when I'm angry. I'm sort of blind. I literally can't see. So I tend to trust much more what I do when I'm calm than when I'm angry.
You both suffered trauma. Mitra, I'm told you were forced to leave your home in Iran as a teenager. Pico, your teenage daughter, was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. How's she doing?
She's very well. I also had my house burnt down. I lost everything, yeah.
Now, how do these things, what did you do? It's not, someone said once, it's not that your house burned down, it's how you react to your house burning down.
Exactly.
Yeah, but that's baloney. My house burned down.
Well, you know,
How could you not be pissed?
it's not exactly baloney, I'd say, because, for example, in the forest fire that burnt down our house, 450 different houses were destroyed. And I noticed among my neighbors, some of them were traumatized for life. Some of them thought, well, actually, this gives me a chance to move somewhere else. A lot of that stuff I don't need. In my case, I lost all the notes for a non-fiction book I was working on, so I thought, let me try fiction. And I might never have had the courage to do that otherwise. So there's always some opportunity in anything that happens.
How did you deal with it?
I didn't deal with it very well. I was very young. I didn't have any tools. I didn't have any family. I was in a country that was opposite of my country. I was very young, and I fell a lot, like I say. I always say I fell a lot. I made a lot of judgment errors. I learned as I got up. I learned as I got up, and it was a 2-decade process for me.
I've interviewed Pico Mitra who have lost children of early age or teenagers, and they all have told me there's a piece of them gone, and they never have a day without thinking about it.
Yeah. And
never a
time
day.
doesn't heal, I think, that kind
So
of
if time doesn't heal,
No.
what does?
Losing a child, of course, that's
It's
the
the
worst
worst.
thing, yes. Losing a house is easy by comparison, and even losing a homeland is probably a little better. But, I mean, it's moving to hear what you say, because that's the condition of so many of our neighbors across the planet now. They're all being propelled out of their homes. And so probably that helped you to empathize when you read about what's happening in Syria or parts of
Yeah,
Africa.
Syria, how do people deal with that? Bombs every day.
They can't deal with it. to be honest with you. When you're in that situation, you cannot deal with it. What you do is just you survive it. And then all the stuff comes up later. All the hellish emotions come up later of what you've gone through. But when you're in a crisis, you're not really thinking, how am I dealing with this? You know, you're just going through it. And parts of them, you know, I mean, being from the Middle East and seeing so much unrest in that part of the world. And when I go back and I teach there, I see very much, like, you know, I'll talk about meditation and stuff, and the people will tell me we're just trying to survive. So they're saying what you're saying is like candy. And I'll say, no, but it starts there because it's going to give you peace.
Mitra and Pico are going to answer some of your social media questions in our final segment, plus some takeaways from our experts to start feeling happier today. We'll be right back. We're back. How important is empathy?
It's very important. Where would we be without empathy? We have to always be able to put ourselves in another person's position.
Different from sympathy?
Yes. Anytime you meet anybody, there are certain things you don't have in common with them, certain things you do. And you concentrate on the things you do have in common. If there was a fervent supporter of Donald Trump, and I'm not one right here, I could find places of common empathy with that person. And you were saying, you know, Mitra has suffered, I have suffered, but every person you would have around this table has suffered some terrible loss. And I think empathy and dealing with loss go hand in hand. And remember, I'm not exceptional. I've had my house burned down. Most people have had worse things happen.
We have some social media questions. Pico, Chloe Smith writes, you're a big fan of Leonard Cohen's. What about his music speaks to you?
That he's prepared, just as Mitra was saying, to sit in the middle of the darkness until the light comes, until it rises at the end of the day. That he's not taking shortcuts and he's not grasping at easy answers, but he's got the patience and strength to sit still in the middle of the commotion till it changes.
Mitra, Amira Rita via Facebook asks, how can non-Muslims and Muslims living in America come together in their hearts and minds in 2017?
Let's start by understanding the cultural and religious commonalities by doing intercultural exchanges. So it doesn't become like the Muslims are so different than the other people. You know, I think by education and awareness, we can create these bridges and break down the walls.
Makes sense. Janet Weiner sewed via Facebook. How can we determine our own personal truth and happiness with the thought patterns we already have coupled with life's fast pace, society's norms, and the noise of our daily life?
Unplug. Just step away from that noise and that speed for 6 hours. Go for a walk. Talk to a friend.
Meditate.
Meditate.
I know Pico lives in Japan and Mitra spends times in Iran. Do those countries have a different relationship with happiness?
I think people all over the world experience similar emotions. So although Iran is a very different country and the stress levels are different and the problems are different, at the core of it, I think, we all seek the same things.
Is the Eastern culture different?
I think
it is, isn't it?
Yes, I agree with Mitra that we're all the same. But in this country, we believe in the pursuit of happiness. And Japan, being a Buddhist country, believes really in the reality of suffering. In other words, their expectations are very different. They're not expecting life to be easy. And when wonderful things come, they exult in them, rather than we're hoping things will go well, and then we're very disappointed when they don't. So it's just a different perspective on the same.
What's a good tip when you're feeling low? You're in a mood. It's raining.
To know that emotions, like a great man said to me, is like the weather. They will change. When it's raining, you'll know the sun will come out. Don't give it too much power.
Do you have a tip for someone just how to be a little happier?
Think about the many people around you in your hometown in a much more desperate situation, whether financially or physically or
walk a mile in their shoes.
Well, or just remember that you're sitting on many blessings that they would be envious of.
Is it healthy to have expectation?
I would say it's probably healthier not to have expectation.
You agree?
I agree. I think expectation does us no good because we don't know the future.
Aaron Sorkin wrote a historic letter to his daughter after the election. And he said, our darkest days have always been followed by our finest hours. Do you believe that?
I always believe that through the darkness comes the biggest glory of light. So yes, I do.
Pico?
And again, when President Obama was elected, so many people were so excited, and it was very difficult for him to change things. Now President Trump has been elected, and so many people are very fearful. I don't think those fears are justified necessarily. We should just wait and see how things play out.
There's always, the dark and light is always the interplay. Someone can see today as a horrible day because of the administration, and someone can see it as the most glorious day. So it's all perception, right?
And how many people are dependent on others for their happiness? In other words, if my girlfriend likes me today, I'm better. And if she doesn't like me, I'm distraught.
That's dangerous because your girlfriend may leave you, may go.
No, right?
Yeah. So I think your happiness has to be something you build within, like an inner savings account.
Jealousy or envy.
It gets in the way. Gets in the way of our growth. It gets in the, when you compare, you know, we're not gonna, usually people don't compare themselves to the person who doesn't have those things that they do. They think of the person who has so much more. And so it blinds us from where we are. It discredits us. It says, you know, hey, I'm not loving myself enough. So jealousy gets in the way.
Thank you both very much. It's very illuminating. I'll have you back.
Thank you.
Thanks to my guests, Mitra Rabar and Pico Iyer, for this enlightening conversation. Remember, you can find me on Twitter at King Sings, and let me know what you thought of this show and what additional questions you have. And perhaps we'll have Pico and Mitra back for a follow-up. Until then, don't forget, breathe.